Hey, Jen.
Hey, Dana. Hi, everyone,
Welcome to Hypnosis.
and beyond.
Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Albert Nerenberg, an acclaimed director, hypnotist, and international expert on new frontiers in hypnosis. He has had 12 million views for his TEDx presentation on hypnosis, and coming soon is his latest documentary on the mysteries of hypnosis. Hey, Albert, thanks for joining us today.
Great
Hi,
to be
Albert.
here. Hi, hello.
We are so excited to have you. And for our audience who might not know you yet, tell us a little bit about the journey that has led to you being a guest on Hypnosis and Beyond, clearly the pinnacle in your
Yeah,
career.
yeah, pinnacle. So, yeah, I should the whole story will build towards, like, this moment.
So
Uh,
this,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I should explain that, I'm a reluctant hypnotist in that I'm not a person who and I think it's common. I don't think a lot of people thought, they were back in high school or university thought, "Someday I will be a hypnotist." So I know there are some people who do. For me, I was a journalist. I worked in film. I worked for newspapers, a newspaper reporter, and I was on a documentary about 9/11. Actually, this is 20 years ago or longer, and I watched footage that traumatized me, which is not hard to do because, of course, it's a very traumatic event. And so the story is that I knew I had been traumatized because I couldn't get pictures out of my head, which is
Mm,
also something that happened to a lot of people around 9/11. But it was bad, and I couldn't sleep, and I had issues, and so I saw an ad somewhere that said, "Do you have obsessive thoughts that you can't get rid of?" And I'm not normally the person that would just respond to an online ad, but I was like, "That's me," and it said, "Free call," and so I just called the number, and this I didn't even know who it was, and I didn't even know it was hypnosis. This guy ran a protocol on me, and then I felt
mm.
it go away. I felt this problem that I had for 6 months immediately disappear. And then after that, I was like, "Oh, I should learn how to do this," because I had a lot of friends with trauma, and I thought, "Hey, I could be useful." So that's how I began.
Huh. Wow, that's fascinating. And so, uh, did you start then with trauma in particular, or?
Not as a focus, but it's funny because if you ask me how I started, it also all my stories are weird, and so I remember that one day, I was like I think I was walking down the street, and I just saw a poster that said this is, like, after that experience, it said, "Learn hypnosis." And I again was nothing I would have paid attention to normally. I wasn't interested in hypnosis before that, but because I had that experience, I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I called that number, and then next thing I know, I'm enrolled in the course, and the teacher was actually very good, Ariel
Mhm.
Shirker, who's a Canadian hypnotist. And then that really started my journey. I like a lot of people, I probably had the early mind blowing experience where I was like, "Whoa, hypnosis is much more than I thought."
Mhm.
Um, so that's what happened to me.
And so then it sounds like you've taken a lot of twists and turns in terms of where hypnosis has taken you. Can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I should explain, I did traditional National Guild of Hypnotists training. I trained with Mike Mandel, but I think one thing that I was struck by was that there were these outer edges in hypnosis that were not explained. For example, the relationship between dreaming and hypnosis, the fact that there's no unified model that really explains the phenomena, that
Mm,
even that there's no names for some of the states in hypnosis don't have proper names. And so I had noticed these things. I think it's because I was an investigative journalist, and I was like, "There's something that doesn't add up." And not that I think there's anything wrong. I just thought there's areas of great mystery. Uh,
yeah.
and so at one point, I was invited. I learned. I also was trained a bit in stage hypnosis, and I was invited to do a TEDx. And I decided to go for it in the sense that I decided to do a TEDx, which really is the unified model, or in my opinion, the unified model, which is when you connect REM state dreaming with REM state or deep state trance, everything makes sense to hypnotists. but not to psychologists. So in fact, so I did this TEDx where basically the TEDx was a lot of people think hypnosis is fake. They think it's not real. I'm going to run a bunch of standard hypnotic tests and standard hypnotic inductions on a crowd of people, volunteers, and let's see what happens. That was sort of the gambit. And so all these people came up and I did standard things. I turned some into chickens. I put them into some nebulistic trance, just the usual kind of stage hypnosis things. But people were aghast. They couldn't believe it was real. And I explained the science of it as much as I could while I could. For example, in the TEDx, I demonstrated an induction that Mike Mandel, who's been a guest on your show, has popularized, which is where what you do is you have a person watch your finger going back and forth. And so you imitate REM state dream behavior. And then that puts people into trance. And just that induction suggests there's a connection between REM state dreaming. And I'm going somewhere with this story. After I did the TEDx, it blew up. It went viral because people didn't believe it was real. But then a whole association of psychologists contacted me and said, shut up. They basically said, shut up. They said, stop saying there's a connection between REM state dreaming and hypnosis, because there's not.
Wow.
Yeah, that was my reaction too. That was my reaction.
Yeah. Boy, that's interesting. So did that motivate you to continue or did you stop?
Great question. I wouldn't be here today on this podcast
Oh.
if I hadn't decided to continue, despite the apparent opposition of this association of psychologists. I felt they were wrong. I remember the guy who actually got on the phone with me, and I looked him up, and he said he looked exactly like Leonard Maltin. You know, Leonard Maltin was the guy from Entertainment Tonight. I was like, I'm not letting Leonard Maltin shut me down. And so I went deeper, and I found out it has, I would say, not so much haunted me, but everything I've done, I've found the REM state dreaming aspect of it is critical. When you understand, I did a documentary about dreaming. I make documentaries, and that really helped me realize that there's a lot of dreaming going on in hypnosis. So yes, I kept going.
Well, so then for our audience that really hears REM sleep and REM sleep, and can you sum that up in a couple of sentences? What do you mean by that?
That's a great question. You're right, because people need to know. So when people, I just did a demonstration of hypnosis at the Modernist, which is a club in San Francisco. And this is weird because it's exactly what you're talking about. For the first time, I asked them, let's do it differently. Instead of having an audience way back and then people watching sort of hypnotic stunts up close, what I did is we arranged for the audience to be moved up, right up to the stage. And it has a balcony that kind of overlooks the stage. And then we lit the volunteers so they were really clear to the eye. And I explained to the audience, you're going to witness hypnotic phenomena up close. So, when you do basic training in hypnosis, you are taught, that there are indicators of trance. For example, people begin to blink differently. Sometimes their bottom lip protrudes, sometimes flat affect. There's a bunch of things that go on. But the other thing is that once they go into deeper trance, their eyelids tend to flicker. And this flickering effect is exactly reminiscent of watching somebody who dream. So if you've ever woken up next to somebody who's dreaming, and if you have a kid, because if you had a baby, you've seen it many times, then you see this flickering look. And so the audience saw it and they were like, wow, this is the phenomena. And I polled the audience before the show and asked how many people think hypnosis is fake. And I would say it was like around 50-50. And at the end of the show, I polled the audience again, and it was zero. Zero. And that's, I think, is because sometimes you do stage hypnosis shows and people still think it's fake.
Mm-hmm.
I think that having people up close, the way hypnotists experience hypnosis, changed people's perception of it.
Wow, that's so interesting. So So your first draw to the parallels between those states was the eye movement is what made you see it that way and investigate it, or
That was
is that
that was the first thing that the eyes. So REM state, the eyes both roll up, and they also sometimes move back and forth as if they're seeing something.
Mhm.
And for example, we know if you put a client into deep trance and you describe them walking through a forest, their eyes will move. Now, it's not exactly, it might be the inverse of what you would normally do, meaning if you look right, your eyes might go right, and in when they're in the state, the eyes go the other way. Some people think it's also the third eye, but that's totally speculative. Um, I really believe in evidence-based hypnosis, but you see very similar eye behaviors to dreaming. Also, when I did this demonstration, I got very big into why people become chickens. So I think this is a really fascinating thing. A lot of hypnotists, I'll tell you like this story too, because when I first started hypnosis, one of the things that happens when you tell people you're a hypnotist, they say, "Oh, you're not going to turn me into a chicken, are you?"
right?
And I would, of course, go, "Oh, of course not. I'll never do that. I would never do that." But then one time I was at like a cocktail party, somebody found out I was a hypnotist and they said, "You're not going to turn me into a chicken, are you?" And I was like, "No, don't worry." And then they said, "Hypnotize us." So I was at this party and the people were very hypnotizable. They were wonderful hypnotic subjects. They went into deep trance. And at one point, somebody said, "Turn somebody into a chicken." And so I was like, I don't normally do that, but okay, this once. So, it's not that hard. Once you got somebody in deep trance, you can turn them into chicken pretty quickly. But the guy that I chose happened to be a very tall, heavily built guy. And he was a great hypnotic subject. So all of a sudden, this like 220-pound guy like stood up. There was like a massive chicken in the room. And I was struck by, like, he wasn't a violent chicken, but he was a powerful, he had chicken energy. 220 pounds of chicken energy is pretty stunning. And yeah, so I was struck by that because I realized that this is real. This guy was 100% a chicken. And of course, his friends are falling off their chairs. They can't believe, Buddy's a chicken. And, they're going to be razzing him about it forever. And what's interesting is that after that whole experience, I brought him back. The show was over. They're all laughing about him becoming a chicken. I remember being really affected. I started wondering, like, what just happened? So I started doing research. And I found out this is a mystery within hypnosis and also within human behavior. So why is it that, so you can go to stage hypnosis shows all over the world, America, and often people get turned into chickens. It's hilarious. I even have a thing on my website called the Chicken Challenge now, where anybody can go and watch basically a video. And if you're a good hypnotic subject, it will turn you into a chicken. And people send me their videos. They send me their videos like, "Look, this is me," and they're kind of embarrassing. Well, they're embarrassing only because they're such good chickens. And so I I wanted to know the answer. Like, why? Why would it be so powerful? Why do people become chickens? And why is it so funny? So I looked into it and I found it's actually essentially a mystery. Here's the best explanation. In dreaming, we have an evolutionary advantage to believe our dreams, meaning, I'll give you an example. So, one theory of dreaming is that we learn lessons. So, sometimes we have dreams about scary things in our environment, like wolves or scary people. And then in the dream, we kind of try to find a solution. We do something. And maybe, so for example, if you were being chased by wolves, in the dream, you might climb a tree and then realize, oh, now when it happens in real life, oh, the wolves are chasing me. I saw this once in a dream. I I did it. And now you climb a tree and you save yourself and you pass on your DNA. So this idea is that there's an evolutionary advantage to believing your dreams, right? So as opposed to if you're in a dream and you're like, "Ooh, the wolves are chasing me," and you go, "Ah, it's just a dream. I don't have to, I'll just I'll ignore them and they'll go away. Well, no, you need to believe the wolves are real for you to learn the lesson you need to learn. This is there's a few expressions for this, but they're very obscure. They're called one expression is called dream neutrality, which is the idea that dreams neutrally reflect the viciousness of our environment so that we learn to adapt to our environment. An example is why do kids have so many nightmares? Because until fairly recently, big predators used to carry off our children. Like like leopards or wolves would come into a human encampment and take away the kids. So kids should be afraid. So anyways, my point is, if you accept that dreaming and hypnosis are connected, then this all makes sense. Then you recognize that. So my theory, and it's weird to say like it's my theory. I mean, other people say this, Mike Mandel, the Human Givens people, but it's not an official theory within hypnosis that if you accept that hypnosis is like a waking dream, that it borrows the mechanism of dreaming. So that is precisely why that guy became a chicken, because I put him into a trance, which is like a waking dream, and he's evolved to believe his dreams because it's an evolutionary advantage to believe your dreams. And he's in a dream where he thinks he's a chicken. And it's temporary. That's the important thing. Just like dreams, it's temporary. Meaning, yeah, for half an hour or 5 minutes, he thinks he's a chicken. It's going to gradually go away. But he learns his lesson and he moves on. So maybe my conclusion, I was going to say, is that this is a mystery within human behavior. We all laugh about it. We all know about it, but nobody wants to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. And then I figure that you, as a filmmaker, that must be something that you're also thinking about, is that if that's a dream, also the lessons that can be learned, and we buy in and we believe they're real in the moment. You cry for a character. Well, you know it's an actor in a costume reading lines off a page, but you believe it's real in the moment.
Exactly.
And so then when does that then communicate to your filmmaking approach? Like, are you trying to teach lessons, and are you utilizing that within your craft?
That is a great question, and I think you made a very powerful insight that cinema works alongside of hypnosis. Good cinema is hypnotic, and directors in fiction are taught that when you show your main character, you show them up close. You see their eyes sort of like this. The reason is that we're very empathic creatures, and we start to see through the eyes of the main character very quickly. And we also start to believe the story. We don't care. Part of us knows this is all made up, but we don't care, which is exactly what sometimes hypnotized people report. They go, I knew I was a chicken, but I didn't really care. Or I knew that I was a duck, but I didn't care. And similarly, when we watch a movie, we know it's all made up, but we don't care, and we enjoy the absorption of it. And in the event of a good movie, we experience hypnotic phenomena, time distortion, deep breathing, a sense of restored energy. I find with a good movie, you come out with energy. With a bad movie, you come out fatigued. So that's hypnotic phenomena. So movies are hypnotic, as you pointed out. So yes, I absolutely. The only thing is that I think so many people work at good filmmaking that it's already hypnotic. It's not like me going, oh my, if I applied hypnosis to my movie, it would be 10 times as powerful. People already apply it. They just don't know they're doing it. They already apply hypnosis to movies.
And so then my question is, what about the movies we play for ourselves in our own mind?
Aha. Well, funny you should say that, because I do something called movie therapy. Because that is.
I didn't know that, so I'm just laughing.
Yeah. Movie therapy, because I started to notice that when people come to you, and I'm sure you notice it with your clients, when people come to you and they are troubled, I found myself asking them, isn't it kind of like you're in a bad movie. And what is a bad movie? It tends to have less color, lower resolution, it's more black and white, and it's repetitive. The same crappy things happening over and over again, the same dumb stuff. And that's when people are having a bad life, that's what they report. And you know what's interesting about that? It has biomedical foundations, meaning when people have PTSD, they actually start seeing less color in their lives. That's because the brain goes, I don't need to see the purple. I don't need to see the background. I need to see the things that count. So it dispenses with the beauty of life, which is sad. And so I found that one of the ways that you make people happier is you work on their classic like hypnosis challenges, but you also improve their movie by improving the story, figuring out what the big goals are, giving them more confidence. Here's another interesting thing. A lot of people are not the main characters in their own movies. And I say that, people are like, what? What? I only think about myself or whatever. But you know what? If you experience a lot of, let's say, envy that you sometimes can't help, like you think other people have great lives and you don't, then literally you're making other people the star of your movie. And so challenging yourself to become the star of the movie of your life is an empowering thing.
That just makes me think of my grandparents every day watching soap operas. And I'd be like, as a kid, going, go make your own soap opera in your own life, right? Because you're tuning in every day to somebody else who's better looking, living out your dreams.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
That's right. That's the same thing. The same reason people like read People magazine or, the kind of star follow the, celebrities. They're living through other people, and they've accepted that they don't like their own movie. That I have a boring, crappy movie. And for them, it's probably a humble decision. I'm just a humble accountant or whatever it is. So they just don't want to be the star of their movie. But yeah, it's very empowering. And like, what's interesting, two dramatic things happen when people become the star of their movie. Things tend to start working out for them a bit more, not necessarily a lot more, but a bit more. And two, they start seeing color again. Because, the unconscious mind starts noticing that life is beautiful, and it wants to be in a beautiful movie.
But it just makes me think, so where is the fine line between being a narcissist and being the star of your movie?
Yeah.
That is a really good question. So I would still say that self-confidence requires a strong inner narrative, and that's not narcissistic. It's like the principle of, you're on a plane, they tell you have to put if there's a trouble, you should put the oxygen mask on you before other people, because you can't help other people unless you're breathing, right? Unless you're conscious. And I think you can't help other people unless you're confident. You don't have to be supremely confident, but you just have some confidence. And so I think that a certain amount of self-confidence, and this is interesting, I'm really glad you brought that up. What I've noticed is that narcissism is a standard healing stage for everyone. Meaning, when you are in crisis, it is normal to be a bit narcissistic. I have to figure out what's going on with me. It's my problem. But a healthy person naturally moves out of that narcissistic stage and becomes more interested in other people and becomes more compassionate and empathetic, specifically because they know, like, oh, I know what that kind of suffering is like. So it's a really good question. I say generally you're always trying to motivate people, because some of the best things in life are helping other people, seeing other people succeed, making people smile. So these are not narcissistic goals.
Wow. So much to think about.
But we do have, but I do have something to say about malignant narcissists, but maybe it's a whole other episode. Um,
I'm sure we could go on and
yeah,
on about. Unfortunately, I think most of us are familiar with a narcissist or two.
yeah,
Uh,
me too.
so, you know,
Um,
I'm very interested in you talking a bit about your use of laughter.
Yeah,
And
so I should explain that when you do documentaries, it's kind of hypnotic. It's like a deep dive into something, and I was lucky enough to make actually the first feature documentary about laughter, called Laughology. It sounds weird because people always, when I say that, people are always like, "What? You don't look 150 years old." There must have been, there must be 100 documentaries about, Charlie Chaplin or something like that. But a lot of people made movies about humor, comedy, jokes, but no one had ever looked at laughter, the behavior, which is a different thing. For example, humor is just hundreds of thousands of years old, or maybe less. It's a recent phenomena. They think laughter is millions of years old because they now think that certain animals laugh. So, so laughter. Doing this film changed my life, and it partly was having a kid. I had a make a long story short. During a kind of crisis in my family, we had a daughter, and it was a very challenging, gloomy time. And I noticed this wonderful thing. Like, first of all, if you've probably had kids, you know that newborns are technically not a lot of fun. They they just poop and cry more or less. And
basically,
yeah. And so until there's this miracle moment that's usually about 30 or 40 days in where the baby suddenly smiles and or laughs, and that laughing behavior like changes everything. And I was struck by that. And what I do, and same thing in hypnosis, I'm a kind of master of the obvious. So meaning, until I made this documentary, I don't know why there had never been a fuss made about this particular thing. So the particular thing is that all babies, regardless of culture, education, civilization, start laughing between 30 and 60 days. And there are no exceptions. Like, there's no place on earth where it does not happen. And it shows that we're all the same culture, the same race. It's really a powerful idea. And I found the guy who kind of proved it. And so when that happened, I went to the TV network and said, "My daughter's laughing. My daughter's laughing." And I convinced them that no one ever made a documentary about laughter. I found all these crazy other aspects of laughter. I don't know if you know this, but there was a laughter epidemic in Africa in 1962 where 35,000 people in Tanzania started laughing for months and didn't stop. So I went to Tanzania and tried to figure out why this epidemic happened. I went to a laughing church in Florida, as a church where they laugh for Jesus, which is actually quite amazing. And so I looked at all this kind of weird laughter phenomena. And after that, I thought people need to laugh more. Laughter is one of the most powerful de-stressing behaviors. It strengthens the immune system. And then I happened to notice that when you can hypnotize people to laugh. So a lot of people don't know this. It's very easy. You just put somebody in a good somnambulant trance and you say to them, if you hear someone laugh, you will laugh. And then you just go, ha 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 ha. And then they start laughing. And then they will, if you say, now you think it's twice as funny. And then you go, they start laughing twice as hard, 3 times as hard. So I had observed this. And then at last year's Hypnothoughts, I was talking about this phenomenon with some other hypnotists. And there was like a cocktail party. And it actually was kind of quiet. Usually the parties at Hypnothoughts are pretty good, but people were just sort of sitting around quietly. Nothing was really happening. So somebody had an idea. Why don't we hypnotize some people to laugh? So there was like an empty chair and was kind of lit up. And we put it under the light. And we sat people down and we said, okay, we're going to hypnotize you to laugh. And because it's Hypnothoughts and people are open to hypnosis, it was very easy to find people. So people just sit down, put them in a trance, start laughing. Then next person, start laughing. And what we saw, and everybody witnessed it, was amazing. So people would start laughing like you often start with a giggle, which becomes a guffaw. And then they're like holding their bellies. And actually, because I studied this, they can go full on to laughter paralysis. So laughter paralysis is why people start like falling out of their chairs or crawling on the floor. And that's because when you laugh really hard, it overwhelms the motor control system of the brain and you can't move properly. And we saw all of that happen, even though nothing was funny. Well, nothing originally was funny. It was funny that people were laughing. So after that, I was like, this is interesting. Something is going on. And I also have a bit of a theater background, but I also, as a man, sounds funny. I think one of the things that's wrong with men is our emotions. We're not very good at expressing emotions. Sometimes we're good at anger, or some men are. I shouldn't generalize, but generally, men are, for example, bad at crying. And I became interested in this question, like, why are men so bad at crying? Well, of course, they've been told not to cry, and etc. And I wondered if you can hypnotize people to laugh, maybe you can hypnotize them to cry. So I did it. The last hypnothoughts, I had done it a bunch of times. I hypnotized people to laugh. They start laughing really, really hard. And then on a dime, you can basically go, okay, now you're going to start crying. You don't even need motivation. Well, I use behavioral motivation, which is I just have people look down, because when you look down, you get a little bit sad. But because you can affect double in hypnosis, I go, well, now you're twice as sad, 10 times as sad. And then they started to sob. And so it was kind of an awkward moment, because I was like, oh, my volunteers are like sobbing and they look really sad and it looks kind of bad. But I knew that because of hypnotic laughter that they would be okay. So first of all, I don't tell them why they're sad. I don't say you're sad because of something bad that happened in your life. I just let them express the kind of sadness that might be in them. And I simply have them raise their heads. So I say, raise your head. And now it's very easy to start laughing. And you see them go, they're like sobbing. And then they go from this very sad state to actually laughing it off. And people, I think, saw that moment was very powerful. That part blew my mind. And I did a bunch of research, because you may find this interesting, is there's a theory that there's a design flaw with the human brain. Sounds funny because we think, we're so perfect, we're so amazing. But it's called the depotentiation problem. And the depotentiation problem is, like, you've probably noticed this yourself, that you notice that if something, you can be having a really good day, but if one bad thing happens, like you get a ticket, or somebody gives you a call about something you got to worry about, you notice that your whole mood goes south, right? And it can be that way for for hours. Even though you might go home and make a nice dinner or have a nice experience, that's depotentiation, meaning the theory is that once you get aroused by a negative state, you do not let it go easily. And this is evolution. Again, it's because probably when we were in the jungle and you saw a crocodile, you should get afraid, and you should not forget that the crocodile was right there. And so you hold on. And the people that hold on the best survived. So that's why people, when they get into bad moods, stay in bad moods. Often we see this with kids and stuff like that. So I did an experiment at Hypnothoughts where we put people into very sad states. They're very sad. They do not look good. They're crying. And then within 10, 15 seconds, they can switch into wild, happy laughter, and they do not remember why they were crying. And so I think that I don't want to say we've solved the depotentiation problem, but I think there's some inkling here of possibility that something could happen.
Fascinating. So then does that mean that if somebody were to come to you as a hypnotist, for hypnotherapy, and they had a trauma, let's say, are you saying that maybe you would have them cry and then laugh and then cry and then laugh, or?
Often I would. So what I've done in the past is I do sometimes bring people out laughing, because I'm like, what better way to come out of a dark place than to come out laughing? But I do it very judiciously, because there's some risk about laughing at things that are very heavy or that are unresolved. So I do it carefully, but I would say where it applies practically is more if I sense that people are really pent up, that they haven't been able to figure out how they feel about things. and that they want to explore their emotional states. It's best done, from my experience so far, content free, so that people just more explore what they can do rather than, because there's some risk, if a person comes to you and they got trauma and you say, okay, I'm going to make you cry, then there's some risk of obviously triggering them, which you don't want to do.
I'm just wondering, when you're dealing with these people, also if you're following up with them to find if they're more lighthearted generally in their life after that experience.
Yeah. So, well, I know this from laughing too, is that laughing leaves you exactly feeling more lighthearted just when you laugh in life. And I was concerned, like after hypnothoughts, because it was like an hour where maybe of the timing, it was like I talked for 10 minutes and then maybe they went into trance 5 minutes. And then it was like 45 minutes of laughing and crying, or it was an intense. And I remember thinking, ooh, this is kind of intense. And they did mention that they were, so I asked both of them, and everybody else who saw it wanted to know how they felt like after the next day, that they had a feeling of sort of relief. And I also find that people feel this. So they were a bit tired because of, I think, crying and laughing, but they also had like a overall good feeling. And I think that's usually what would happen.
So what's really interesting today too is when we go to comedy, right? Like everything's taboo. We have to wonder if it's okay to laugh and whatever.
Yeah.
So it kind of takes me back to like slapstick, where it's like, just like, let's all just agree to laugh at this stupid thing, right?
Yes.
And get along, you know?
Yes. I think you're
Yeah.
right. And I think that's a bit, even the exercise I did was as simple as look down, feel sad. And there is science based. There's a study that shows that when you look down, you change the brain waves in your brain to be a little bit depressive. And when you look up, just the act of looking up actually makes you more optimistic. So because they are there, we can pull them out in trance. And so I would say, and that's exactly what you're saying, is that we're agreeing. One of the trouble with humor is it escalates. Once you start telling jokes, you need really smart jokes or better jokes or stronger jokes. But with laughter, you don't. You can just laugh. And it's what you described as that much more chummy family feeling that you get. We're all just laughing about whatever's happening, and it's a different experience. Part of this is weird. Like I should explain it. Part of it is like was making documentaries threw me into some of these things. So I made another crazy documentary called "You Are What You Act," and it's basically, the documentary is about emotion. That emotion leads us. I heard a great line, which is that emotions are the tunnel leading us towards the light. And like we're often struggling with emotion, but they're taking us somewhere. And I was struck by the fact that emotions have been so repressed, culturally repressed. And actually, it took me a while to figure out. I was like, why? When I was working on this film, I was like, what's this pattern? Why are emotions always repressed? And why are they so historically viewed so negatively? And then I was like, aha, you know why? It's really scary. Why? Because emotions are associated with women, and it's ultimately misogyny. That we live in a misogynistic culture where we devalue what is considered to be feminine behavior. And because women were always seen as so emotional, that even the study of emotions was devalued. And that's why it only took till like recently for evidence that laughter was good for you to come out, because they're like, why would anyone study laughter? It seems so trivial. And same thing with other emotions. There's a whole bunch of other emotions that are positive that nobody has looked at. Smiling is a fantastic state, but there's not a lot of research about smiling.
But what about men hating? Like the fact that as women, we're like, oh, we don't let men be sensitive, right? I know that I've had that experience where I've had to work through that because, we've talked about it, Dan and I, it's like there was something about that, like told to us, hypnotized, whatever it was, that if a man was sensitive, but yet you're cutting off their creativity too, because the emotions create the creativity.
Totally. No, I think that's the flip side of it. The flip side of sexism is that, of course, it sort of like compresses women, doesn't allow women to express themselves and be themselves ultimately. But men too, men are not allowed to be vulnerable. They're not allowed to be lost or confused. So they tend to repress it, and they're not allowed to cry. And I think, like, imagine, like, crying is an essential part of human behavior, and imagine that, like, you just don't do that. That can't be okay.
Exactly. Not good for anybody.
Yeah. And people, like, I just remember as a kid, I remember as a kid learning not to cry, and I was like, God, I just gotta not cry. I gotta, and I succeeded, unfortunately.
Yeah. The repression of any emotion, it's better to feel it, learn from it, and decide whether you want to stay in it, right? So that brings us to our next segment, which is our silly subconscious question. And for you today, Mr. Albert, our question is, if your life up until this point today had a smell, what would it be?
That's a really good question. Um, just because I was swimming yesterday in a lake, I would say, like, the happy smell in my life is actually the smell of algae, that sort of fresh lake smell. I've just been smelling it a lot recently, and I really love that smell. It makes me happy. But when you said that, I thought of this fresh lake, and then I thought jasmine. But I think jasmine was me thinking, oh, that's like a, kind of cooler smell, but fresh lake smell, I would say.
I like it. I like it. It's interesting.
Nice.
Wonderful.
And is there something beyond you'd like to tell us about?
I should explain I'm working on a really crazy documentary, which also relates to REM state theory. It's a complicated issue, and I would say hypnotists know, or some hypnotists know, that in deep trance, some people. It's funny how I first got on this story. I had a friend who was a hypnotist who said, I had this embarrassing situation happen to me the other day. I was doing hypnosis, and the client suddenly said, I'm really sorry, I just had an orgasm. And so she was like, was it something I said? And so she was kind of baffled by it and bewildered. And so she later began exploring the concept of erotic hypnosis, but that was her first interface. Where I came across it personally first is I went to a stage hypnosis show, probably in Las Vegas, probably 10 years ago. And at the end of the show, just like you turn people into chickens, the stage hypnotist said, and now everyone on stage will have a massive orgasm. And I should point out, they said it was without consent. So it's a bit of a touchy. I think now people are more careful. So then all these people were like having an experience which looked like a massive orgasm. And so I was like, wait a second, what's going on? And also, so being an inquiring investigative reporter, I was like, what is this? Is it real? And if it is real, what does it mean? So I've just made a crazy documentary about this. It's called Coming Soon. I had to find a name that could sort of wouldn't get me into trouble. And
that's great.
And it's about it is mind-blowing, because I should explain that the film led to a study. Actually, there was a study called the Prague Experiment that was done where we actually hypnotized people in Czechoslovakia, in the Czech Republic, to have hypnotic orgasms, and then we blood tested them before and after, and we were able to prove that there was a hormone present in their blood that would only occur in the event of orgasm. So we now know the orgasms are entirely real, and they can be induced by hypnosis, which is utterly, on some level, bizarre. People do not know this. That's why it's a great subject for a film, because people are like, what? Most people are like, I didn't know that. Or some hypnotists know it. Or within the hypnosis world, it's touchy for obvious reasons, because if you're a hypnotherapist, you don't want people worried that you might have them have a spontaneous orgasm without their permission. Of course, none of us would ever do that, but maybe there are people that would. So there's an ethical concern. But in the course of making the film, I found out that hypnotic orgasms are really amazing. I'll explain why. So I just want to say there, obviously they feel good. People have them will say they feel better than regular orgasms. But what is really amazing about them is that if you took a person who's never had a hypnotic orgasm and then you put them on like a regimen, so they, let's say, have them like 2 or 3 times a week.
A regimen, I love it.
Yeah, they're like, oh, this can be hard. And their complexion changes. They look like years younger. They have this beautiful, fresh look. People are all like, what happened to you? Are you in love? You know, and it is obviously so good for people to go through this experience. And then the crazy thing, and it's in the film, we found out was that, I don't know if you know this, but a certain percentage of the population is anorgasmic. A lot of people don't know, meaning they've never had an orgasm in their life. And it's 10% of women in America are anorgasmic, which I was shocked to hear that, but I guess it's true. And so during the course of the film, we had anorgasmic people come to us, and then we hypnotized them, and they had orgasms. So there are potential huge therapeutic implications in my view, and that's why I thought I should make a documentary about it.
Laughter, orgasm.
Yeah, the good stuff.
All the good time.
Good stuff. Yeah.
And chickens.
And chickens. And like laughing at your friend who's a chicken. Yeah.
Let's see. Can you laugh while having an orgasm as a chicken?
Yes. So in fact, the main character in the documentary had a laughgasm. So she, I can tell you, I can break it down for you. When you laugh, you create dopamine, which you can feel. If you go into hypnotic trance, you can effect double that dopamine. So it's twice as strong, 10 times as strong, maybe 1,000 times as strong. That pleasure is so intense, it becomes orgasmic. And then you have a laughgasm. So you can laugh your way to orgasm for sure.
I love it. Interesting.
So just out of curiosity, like the laughter and the orgasm hypnosis, would you be able to time it so it would happen like after your therapy, like a few times a week regularly for people? Or, I'm just wondering.
If with a very good hypnosis.
He's asking for a friend.
With a very good what are you doing next week? Like,
why do you only have Albert on your show every week? I thought you guys were going to interview other people. Don't worry about it.
That's a really good question. I'd say the answer is yes, because I think you need a very good hypnotic subject, but somebody who's really good. I call it telegasm, where you could call somebody and you would just I think you could implant a trigger that they would consent to, where you could say, when you hear this sound, you will immediately have an orgasm, and it would probably work. But I think the way people are, they would rather have it be a little more elaborate than that. So a telephone call or something along those lines. And yeah, then they would have an orgasm. And yeah, it would.
Jennifer's got a new specialty.
I've got a lot to think about. Thank you.
But by the way, I think it should be for people a new specialty. There are people who do erotic hypnosis, but it is underground, and it's there are some, we know, like Kaz Riley, who's at Hypnothoughts, does ethical erotic.
She's been on the show.
Okay, right. So she does ethical erotic hypnosis, but I think there is a lack of awareness that there can be ethical erotic hypnosis. And by the way, some people are like, oh yeah, but I don't like my sexiness ethical, because people are people are like, they want something mysterious, but it actually can be totally sexy and ethical at the same time, because if you create a deep trance, anything's possible. So it can be whatever you want, so to speak. You don't let the kind of idea that's going to be namby-pamby, well, now we're going to have nice, safe orgasms. No, they can be weird orgasms too.
I love it. I'm having the best time watching Jennifer.
It's like, dude, where are my eyes going, right?
Yeah, where are your eyes going? Yeah.
Well, we
Oh,
so appreciate you making time for us
Oh, this has been
today,
so much fun. Like, it's been such a
and
great interview.
we
Yeah,
look forward to next time.
you're right.
Next week, same time, same place. I
That's
mean,
right.
at some point in the future.
According to the schedule
And,
regimen of we have a
exactly.
in the movie, there's we show somebody's calendar, and they have, orgasms, like, every Monday, because that's the thing, you could schedule it in your calendar, which is not how people normally run their sex lives, you
Right.
know?
Interesting.
something to
Yeah.
think about.
Yes.
Well, with that, Jennifer, what do we always say?
Peace out.
Peace out.